Hey now, cats, we're back again on another episode of Movie Snobs. Who the fuck are the movie snobs? Well, let me tell you, that would be me. You might know me from all my other shitty shows and things I do. I'm Boss from Ellwood. And here's my ride or die, my main motherfucker, Matt Wheels O'Nesty. He is the other movie snob. And what's the premise of the show, Wheels? Can you tell everybody?
That being a movie snob is okay, and the best thing that you could do if you say that you genuinely love movies is to watch all movies, even ones that you may not think are in your Q zone or wheelhouse, because it's something that brought me and Balls really, really close together. We quickly realized we really loved movies, but we started talking about a lot of shit that neither of us saw, and we thought, wow, maybe, just maybe, we can convince the other that these are cool. And that's exactly what happened. We're, Christ, like 15 episodes deep. Every time we do this, we have no idea how many we've done previously. Um, we're both doing fine.
But that's not the important
Yeah,
thing. The
but
important thing
that's not the
is
important thing. It's the movies.
we're growing, we're learning, we're adapting. But and I don't know about the last part. But anyway, this week we usually pit two movies against each other. Wheels gives me a movie that I would necessarily probably never watch in my personal life, and we do this. I do the same to him. I make him watch one of my movies that I think is pretty awesome, and then we discuss. Sometimes we like them, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we get turned on and we end up becoming fans. Which a lot of the time, which surprising to me in this experiment, I've liked way, way, way more stuff than I ever dreamed or imagined, and I've actually become a fan of a lot of the stuff that you dig, dude. Which now I'm thinking,
And
man, I can't believe I've never even discovered this, and I can't even remember a time where I would have never had this in my life because I actually like some of the shit so much. So,
and the feeling is mutual as you coming from the horror and the horror background, mostly me coming from the pretentious, snooty art house world. Um, But this episode, I really, really like what we did with this episode. I gave you Roberto Rossellini's Germany Year Zero, and you gave me, oh my God, I'm blanking on the director's name because I'm a bad host, but the new and incomparable Godzilla Minus One that just came out in the last few years.
so would you like to take the reins first, and we could talk about
I'll
Godzilla minus one?
happily take the reins first. It was cool, which this is fun. I think this is actually, other than maybe when I watched Shakespeare Shitstorm, I think this is the most contemporary movie you've shown me. Especially, it's something that's come out
Yeah,
recently. It's
I
something
would
that
think so.
has actually had some acclaim. But hilariously, for some reason, I feel like I've had Godzilla minus one on my list. I've been saying it to you, and I've been saying it to our mutual friend Jesse Pimpinella a lot. I'm gonna watch this. I'm gonna watch this. I'm gonna watch this. But never got around to it. And then you finally forced my hand and said, "God damn it, you motherfucker. You're gonna watch this
That's
fucking movie
exactly what I said.
and you're gonna watch it for the movie snobs episode," forcing me to finally watch the Godzilla minus one. And it was an amazing experience. I actually really enjoyed the experience. Like I'm typically not, and this is on par with everything that we've done throughout this entire series. I'm not typically a horror guy. I'm not typically a monster movie type of person. I don't mind them, and I like the like destruction and stuff is fun. But what I liked about Godzilla minus one is one, it was focused on a moment in time that genuinely you can point to and say, this is where we became modern society, and this is where everything changed. That is one of my favorite. I may not watch a lot of Godzilla, but I am really into the idea that Godzilla is this big metaphor for the bomb and for war and for what we've done to nature and sort of this nature fighting back. And I was really, really drawn to how that played out through this entire movie, sort of this um it was a very human Godzilla movie, which I thought was really, really cool. I liked um I liked the focus on the people, and I love the focus on the people not understanding what their responsibility was when tragedy begins to strike. I thought that was an insanely relevant message to be talking about, especially with everything we're going through in life and society, is sort of this like, what do we do when we see the face of the monster? Whose responsibility is it? Unfairly, I did talk to our mutual friend Jesse Pimpinella a little bit about this yesterday. There was one thing that he got me hip to I didn't notice and did kind of change my outlook on this movie a little bit. But I really, really, really enjoyed this, it was the people who had to come together. It wasn't the governments, it wasn't, it was the way that you fight this monster is through unity. And I really, really liked the the main scientist with the crazy hair. I think his final speech that he sort of gives, rallying everyone up, I thought was a really, really cool. We don't need to kill ourselves to make a difference. We don't need to die or sacrifice anyone. Our goal is to live. And this whole through line of we're going to live for the future, I loved. I absolutely loved it. I love what that represented.
I'm not even gonna lie to you, dude. I actually got a little teary-eyed at the near the end there. I mean, for a Godzilla movie, like, would you ever thought in a million years that it would be so profound? Like, I mean, that's something you're not expecting from a monster movie. Like, I
Yeah,
mean,
no, you normally will find yourself cheering for the monster and the destruction and like how cool all this is, but there was a lot of effort put into focusing on the humanity and empathy and creating empathy around like the Akiko character around the little girl and sort of all like what all this means. Another cool thing I really liked about it was even just historically, it's not often you get to see like we normally when we talk about post-war or the end of war Japan, we're focused on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but we rarely talk about the fire bombings of Tokyo, which may have done just as much death and destruction as the actual atom bomb, even though it didn't end the war, it razed the entire fucking area to the ground. And I thought it was a really cool way of showing how that war, how this monster, how, and when I say the monster, I don't just mean Godzilla, I mean the monster that is war and that is death and destruction, how it impacted everyone, how it didn't discriminate the fighters. It didn't just kill the fighters, it killed the parents, it killed the kids, it killed the innocent, the ones who couldn't fight it. It didn't matter. And in that empathy and creating that empathy, it set a set of circumstances where as you're watching this, you're going, I can't see any more tragedy befalling this little girl. And I thought that was really cool. So I did, and I also like sort of this idea that it was a through line, the war never ends, right? Like for your main character, the war never really ended for him. And I think that's something that's also it's cool doing this through a monster movie, but it's also something that's insanely relevant when it comes to war and when it comes to sort of the destruction we bring on ourselves as a society. These fights never end. The war never ends. Even when we get to go home, even when we finally, blow the monster up and crash into his face and explode him. At the end of the day, we may think that the war is over, but it's not. And it doesn't really end. And you have to be vigilant and aware of what comes next and what that threat is that's looming and how to stop it from getting out of hand again. And I thought that was really cool. I mean, I really liked it. I did really like it.
I'm really, really glad that you dug it as much as I did. I knew Jesse would get it. I knew you would get the underlying
But
text. Because I mean, in all honesty, it has so many different things. Like it's a redemption tale. It's a tale about the horrors of war and the effects. You see all the way down the line how it affects everyday people and pretty much every echelon of society. And like I knew you would read between the subtext of it just being a
here's
monster movie.
here's something that like, and this is what I mean when I say like I actually talked to Jesse and my brain started to re-register some of this too because I remember watching this. I'm watching this. And I was getting very frustrated with how much serendipity there was in this movie, how much like happenstance or how much like things were becoming very clean, like there was clean solutions constantly happening. Like the one thing that frustrated me actually while I'm watching the movie was like I Noriko didn't have to die, right? Like, well, she didn't die, but she didn't have to like sacrifice herself in the way that she did. Like, she 100% could have fit into the alleyway with the main character whose name is escaping me right now, and I don't want to even try. But like, she literally could have went into the alleyway with him, but instead she shoved him and then went back into got shoved by Godzilla. Um, and I remember thinking about that a lot while the movie was going. I was like, she didn't need to fucking die. What the hell was this? Now the main character, now he's gonna kill himself, and not like, and this girl's gonna be alone. I was so pissed off. And then at the end, when she shows back up and she's alive, I was like, what the fuck? What a cop out! Like, what the fuck is this? I was like, this is an insane cop out. And it's funny. I'm saying this to Jesse, and he goes, asshole, didn't you realize the scar on her neck? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, she was regenerating. And he started to point out to me, like, no, like Godzilla, and, going back to what I said, and now it's starting to register, fuck, this is really a one-to-one to the bomb. Is she was killed by this thing, but now the radiation from it is impacting her body. It brought her back to life, but now it's regenerating her. And then it started getting me to think about, what did this do? What are the consequences? And then it started, then this thing that was serendipity and these things being tied up in clean loose ends, the logic started to track again. And I realized, oh my God, even in this happy ending, there's still a lot of consequence that's gonna befall on these people in the immediate aftermath. And to me, I that's kind of what I look for in movies. I don't just want clean endings. I want to know whether or not this consequence is going to follow them, or if it's completely gone. And I thought that was a really cool detail, and it was a very subtle detail that I did not pick up, and it took somebody who had watched it a couple of times to point it out, and it was like, holy shit, okay, this just kind of fixed some of those problems I found myself having
Having with it.
with it as I was experiencing it.
Well, dude, I'm actually I'm really excited that you liked it because, like, I know whenever you say Godzilla, the first thing that comes to people's mind is like some cheesy dickhead in the monster suit. It's like I'm glad that these movies are going in this direction where there is this kind of like importance, like, because I mean, I'm a fan of all that old cheesy stuff, but I feel like the direction it's going, I feel like this is way more relevant, important at the times. Like, I things I like about film is when they are reflective to society and societal things going on right now, and I can't think of a better movie that
Yeah.
could kind of give you that example. And I
Because
mean,
it showed, as we started fucking around, we're fucking around with the war, we're fucking around throwing atom bombs in the Bikini Atoll. Like, it woke up the monster. It woke up the monster. And maybe that's one of the big lessons that we can learn as people, just in general, that if we stop upsetting nature or doing things that are pissing off nature, maybe nature will stop trying to kill us. And I don't just mean monsters, I mean like in the real world when it comes to like climate change and us actually having the atom bomb and all these things that we constantly do that piss off Mother Nature. And I know I'm personifying something that's not a person, but I don't know, like Carlin said, like it's not Earth who's in trouble, it's us who's in trouble, right? Like Earth is gonna be fine. Like it's just gonna, what's gonna happen is we piss it off and it's just gonna shake us off like a bad case of fleas
yep,
and start over again. And I don't know, I love this human experiment. I would like to see us keep going into the future and live for the next generations.
absolutely, man. But I'm super happy to dig that. But now we have to turn the focus to your recommendation, which is Germany Year Zero. I have a lot to say about this film, dude. And I know it's funny because if you go back in every episode, I probably give it the same build up. I always sit down and I always put it on, everything you give me, and it starts, and I go, what the fuck? I go there, what the fuck? What the fuck? What is he doing? Like, what am I? Why am I? What the fuck? And then at the end, I'm like, that was a fucking masterpiece. Holy fuck. Well, I mean, and not only that, we couldn't have picked two. We always do this by X, but we couldn't have picked two films that were actually such good companion pieces. Because I mean, we're talking about. Well, I mean, what is this? Another movie that has to deal with post-war.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, I have to say, dude, I gave me a lot of feelings, but there is one thing I wanted to touch on you right out the gate. Am I the only one that thinks there was a lot of really weird, fucking creepy, touchy shit going on with kids in this movie? I
Oh
mean,
yeah, that was actually a really big part of it. And what's hilarious in this is Rossellini. This is why I'm drawn to even like an Italian director like Pasolini. This is a director who is an Italian director in one of the most Catholic countries, obviously, like the hotbed of Catholicism, um, actively showing the priests and the people in power who are, supposed to be helping heal the wounds and we're going to get through this in the power of God. This is a person in 19, I mean, he made this movie in the immediate aftermath of the war, then showing these same people abusing the kids, getting a little touchy-feely or getting a little over the edge, forcing that kid like because that's that movie and why I kind of chose. So Year Zero is the third installment of what Rossellini has called the War Trilogy. There's Rome Open City, Paisan, and then finally Germany Year Zero. Germany Year Zero being through the perspective of a kid is like a kid and this innocence constantly looking around to who's going to help me? Who's going to protect me? I'm surrounded by death and destruction. I'm surrounded by my home isn't there. My parents are barely there. My uncle isn't allowed to leave the house because he's a war criminal. I don't have food. I don't have anywhere to go. And all these protections and people who should be protecting innocents aren't. They're abused.
I felt that when I was watching. I'm like this poor Edmund dude, man, he can't get a fucking break no matter what happens. And I'm like, and then on top of it, I get the ick because then he's all getting like, oh, his teacher's all like fucking touchy feeling with him and shit. And like, I'm like, I don't know how many times I got the ick from all that stuff, man. Because like we've talked about problematic movies from my era that kind of do the same thing, and I'm like, ooh, I can't believe this predates all that other stuff. Like by today's standards, it's still kind of creepy. So I'm like, but yeah, dude, it is, and I know you even have children that are like very young, like where you're, I guess they're, I mean, alluding to them having to prostitute themselves for things, and I mean, I'm like, it's a hard watch, but it is a very, very profound watch because like the feelings this elicited after I seen it, like it is very thought provoking, and it does show like the horrors and the atrocities and the trauma of war very well. And I'm like, and it even amazes me because a movie that old, as I'm watching, I'm like, wow, like
Well,
how did they even develop all the? I mean, it's very well shot, and there's all these.
well, no, it's so why Rossellini, what Rossellini did with the War Trilogy is so magical is the war ends 1945. Italy got freed up a little bit first. So like Rome Open City and Paisan were sort of him focusing on the Italian side of it. And then Germany Year Zero was different in a different place because he wanted to show here's what the aftermath of fascism looks like. Here's what the aftermath of this movement looks like. And the reason everything was so like the set, things were blown up and there was all this mise en because he quite literally took a camera, built a cast, and went and just filmed in the real life places where this shit happened no more than a year or so
I
prior.
actually read that. I thought that was super cool because, like, I mean, you're seeing the actual real devastation
Yeah.
from it, and they're actually filming there. So, like, I mean that level of surrealism alone was pretty amazing, dude. I mean,
It seemed like Rossellini felt a really, it's almost like he had this instinctual call of like, not only do I need to make this work and do I not need to make this art, but I have to be able to show the real life consequence in the environment, the burnt out buildings, the holes in the ground, the destroyed water sources. And I sort of think that showing of here's what happens in the aftermath. Sure, the war is over, but look at the suffering and look at the wake of destructions that's left behind. How are we going to ever recover? And here we are 80 years out of it, still wondering the same question, did we ever recover?
well, judging by what's going on today, no, we have not. And not only that, I mean, spoiler alert for anybody's gonna, that's tuning in now and wants to, see this movie. But dude, that ending alone was a punch in the stomach. I was like, I just sat here after everything was over, and I'm like, wow, like it was very, it was like a nice punch in the stomach. But I
It
mean,
is it's that is an that the ending to that movie, which we're just going to spoil it if you're getting to this point or you're interested. We really didn't spoil too. I actually had to spoil some things with Godzilla. But like always, watch the movies and then come watch us. We don't give a shit about views. Um, that movie, the ending, the kid killing himself, finally having enough, looking around the world around him, the destruction, there is nobody left to protect me. Nobody cares to protect me. The people who I should be counting on, I can't count on. And this kid taking it upon himself, climbing to a high building and jumping and killing himself, to me is one of the most powerful observations about what fascism does, what that movement and what that stood for, what that does to humanity and what it does to innocence, because it's a very, Rossellini's picking a kid because it's immediately understood when it's a child that innocence is a given. And that child is trying to grow up in a world where innocence can't exist. And him realizing very quickly that the only out is not life, is to not live anymore. Um, some people call it cynical and some people call it pessimistic, but I sadly call it real. I call it realistic and real life. Because when all society is broken down around you, when the institutions aren't there for you, when the people in power don't give a shit about you, when you can't count on family or neighbors, you can't count on the priests, or you can't count on the teachers, you can't, and they all just kind of look the other way and allow the suffering to continue. Sadly, that's kind of the last ditch effort to be understood or for people to pay attention and go, holy fuck, what's going on here? And that ending, I mean, that's even worked its way into my own art, into how I view tying up stories. Is I don't necessarily want, and this is what made Rossellini so powerful. You don't need to show people the happy ending, and you don't need to show people that it worked out, because as someone like him who lived through the actual experience, it doesn't work out. It doesn't work out at all. And sure, the war may end, but Mussolini still ran amok through Italy. Hitler still ran amok through all of Europe. There was a Holocaust. A lot of people died who did not need to die simply because of their ethnicity or religion or some skewed belief that didn't fit to their norm, and that's what makes that movie so powerful and makes that ending so powerful. And it's a gut punch, but tell me if you felt the same way. It almost feels like someone dumping cold water on your head.
Yeah, dude, it was very necessary. I did feel like it was it's a wake up call, really, and I think that's the kind of things that resonate with me the most. And I'll be honest with you, dude, I watched it probably 3 or 4 days ago, and I still think, but still, it's one of those things that stick with you, and I still think about it. It's like, I mean, I'll just be at work and I just think of that scene, and it's kind of a jolt. And I think things like that couldn't be more important and relevant right now.
Well, it is. I mean, it's something that you should be able to look at and go, this is wrong, and we can't. And that's again, it's why it was important to Rossellini to film while the buildings were still destroyed and while, they're still in this recovery. He gave no room for recovery. He gave no time for building efforts to happen. It was to show this is the consequence of inaction. This is the consequence of looking the other way and saying, it's going to work itself out. These people can't be that bad. And I highly recommend. I gave you year zero on purpose. I started with the final one, because it's not like there's not sequential. There's no callbacks to anything else. But I gave you the final one first because I thought it was more important to see, and for even our viewers to see, this is what it could look like at the end. Even if everything works out and shit's fine, this is what's left. And that what's left, um, it's not really a lot to build up from, and it's still going to cause pain and suffering. I highly recommend his first two. I highly recommend Rome Open City. It's a really cool dialogue and a really cool narrative showing what resistance looks like during the occupation, during the fascist occupation of Rome, and sort of what the partisan fight looked like. Paisan was showing what the different stages of war look like from the northern part of Italy, and then was like short stories and went all the way down to the bottom of the boot and showed you sort of every like the actual what the war looked like. And it was a cool story of covering what every aspect of it does. But I really, really thought Year Zero was a really perfect starting point because of that innocence factor. This can innocence exist in the aftermath of what that fascist movement was? And Rossellini and a lot of the directors who lived through that experience and lived through that war and made films on the back end of it, it really seems like they're all in agreement that innocence really can't exist. And that there is a real call to action that people need to take seriously to make sure that that shit doesn't keep happening.
I think that's a really good point, man. I think this episode is probably the most important one we've did so far because I mean, shit, yeah, and it is amazing how both of these kind of really complement each other, and we do it by accident all the time. But I couldn't think of a better companion piece than these two films. And they both kind of have a similar theme, and I mean, it's a very important theme. And I mean, I really liked what you said earlier about even if everything allegedly works out, there's still consequence to all these horror and atrocities. And I mean, it's just it's more relevant now than I think it's ever been. And I mean, I hate to be on the the soapbox, but I mean, if people don't you know wake up and start doing things, you are going to have that where
The
people throw their head in
monster,
the sand.
and
Yeah, the
bring it back
monster.
again. So, and again, this is relevant to movies, and I promise we're not just going on politics. Movies are political. They're
Yeah.
supposed to be. Art is political. It's
Yep.
supposed to be. Even just basic observation, I always use Jerry Seinfeld as a funny example where they go, well, Jerry Seinfeld's not political. I mean, yeah, he is observational comedy. Even if you're not talking about politics, politicians, or policy or whatever, he's still making observations about things around him that he views are mundane, that you may not view are mundane, but he's pointing them out to you. And I think art falls under that, and it's important. And the biggest through line in this episode is if you see the face of the monster, regardless of what that monster is, whether it's Godzilla or if it's a burgeoning fascist movement, you have a duty to do something. You have a responsibility to step up. And it's hard and it's terrifying. It's really, really, really scary. Um, but again, what was the through line in Godzilla and what was the main point in Year Zero is what does the future look like after all of this? And how do we make the future livable? The kid in Year Zero, what was going on around him showed him that the future was going to be terrifying and that the future may not be considerate of him or the future may not have any innocence and it may not be protective. But in Godzilla, they had the same fears, but brought up this point of no, our responsibility is to make sure that there is a future, to make sure that there is a place for us to live, that there's a place for us to flourish and be happy and not have to worry about this monster constantly showing up and tearing us down. Because this isn't about governments, this isn't about systems, it's about people and it's about human beings, and human beings have the ability to just be. And that deserves to be protected. And it's something that I really would want all of us to take seriously. And what better way to understand some of these bigger, more abstract thoughts than by simply just watching movies and by
Yeah.
watching movies from people who've experienced this shit, who've studied it, who lived through it. I mean, it's really, really important. So.
I couldn't agree more, man. I think, in all honesty, I think that's one of the biggest things that attract me to film. I mean, film is whether people like to admit it or not, your likes, your interests are essentially you. And I mean, there's nothing more important, than having that reflective mirror to society. And I mean, film can make you do so many different things and elicit so many emotions. And not only that, open your mind to so many different things and problems. And I just, that's the thing that attracts me the most. So whenever I have to say these are two very exemplary examples of the consequences of war. So I mean, I really hope this wasn't so much of a dour episode, but if it is, there's a fucking reason. There's a
Yeah.
point, a very important point, and I think a lot of the stuff that you brought up is really, really good and profound things that people need to hear. But I mean, on a lighter note, before we take off here, I mean, I would like to, I'd like to end the show by, impersonating how Jerry Seinfeld would, would react to Godzilla -1. Like I would think it would be something like, he's like, "Who is this lizard?" That's the worst Jerry Seinfeld impression ever. Who's
Well, that was just terrible.
who's stomping on Tokyo? Who are these lizards?
What's the deal with all these lizards? Where are these lizards coming from? Is he a lizard or a reptile? Oh, no. And then Godzilla steps on him, freeing him from the fucking evil.
I just felt like we needed a little lighter ending. It was getting kind of heavy, so hopefully the worst fucking Seinfeld impression of all time makes people laugh a little bit. Yours was way better than mine, but I mean, still. But anyway, we're the movie snobs. Like my buddy Wheels here said, check out these two very fine films. Another excellent, you knocked it out the park, homie. I absolutely loved it. So I don't know why I always doubt you at this point, because every time I say, I'm like, wow, what the fuck? And then in the end, I'm like, it was fucking amazing. Like how
Well, the
it's
feeling
going.
is mutual. There's time you'll give me movies, I'll read the description, I'll be like, I just don't know if this is gonna be the one where I have to break his heart. And very rarely does that ever
I
happen.
feel the same way, man, because
Yeah.
like I know the reason this works is you and me, despite the genre, we have such a rabid fucking passion for film that like the last thing I want to do is fucking break your heart over something that
Yeah.
you hold so revered and high. And like luckily I really haven't had to do that, man. Like I have really, really appreciated everything we've did so far, other than Mr. Hulu.
I
That
was
one
just gonna say, let's bring
I'm
Mr.
gonna get
Hulo's fucking fantasy vacation or whatever. That's the only one I got
I
from you
am
that I was
going to
like,
get you. I'm gonna find my opportunity, not for the episode, but just in life. I'm gonna find the opportunity to show you because I think I picked. And listen, that episode it informed how I make decisions about movies in the future. I gave you a starting point for Toddy. I should have gave you something way later in his career. So I'm not giving up on Toddy. I'm not giving up on the Hulo character. I think I can get you to see what I see in Toddy.
But that being said, though, I'm not opposed to, I trust your judgment, so like I wouldn't be opposed to like trying something else. But yeah, Mr. Hulo could suck my dick.
Can you imagine that inside the canoe scene? Jesus Christ, that would have changed that movie.
Stroke, stroke, stroke. Literally. But I'm
Surprise.
on that note. Let's get on out of here, brother. Thank you for another incredible episode. Thank you for being my ride or die, buddy. You're a really good friend of mine. I consider you a homie, and anybody who'll sit through all the trash that I like to do a show with me, you're a good dude there, Mr.
I
Wheels.
love you, brother.
I love
Always
you
a
too,
pleasure.
homie. Till the next time, I'm Balls from Ellwood.
I'm at Ernesti.
We're the movie snobs. See you next time. Peace and love.